All right. Hey guys. Okay, so let's talk about how to raise chickens from the chicks that you pick up to laying hen age. Okay, so I know egg prices are high. I've talked about how to take care of chickens already, and then now let's talk about, okay, you decide you want to actually get chicks. What do you need to know to successfully raise chickens? So chickens are really easy, they're not hard to keep, and there's information I gave as an adult chicken to take care of. But as chicks, they need a little extra stuff because they're babies, and baby animals and baby everythings need a little extra help to really thrive. So chicks are no different, they need a little extra. So here's what you will need. You will need a container of some kind. This is what I use. This is a tote that I always use to hatch my chicks in because it has a short edge, and so they can't really get over it, and by the time they're big enough to get over it, they need to go to something else anyway. You're also going to want to use a heat source. Now, I highly recommend that you use this form of a heat source. It's basically like a hot plate, essentially, with legs. So it keeps it warm. Underneath, the heat goes down, so it resembles a mama hen. They hide underneath it for warmth. It's a little bit more expensive than a heat lamp itself, but do not get a heat lamp. I have done the heat lamp thing before too, and I've had friends who have had their chicken coops or barns burned down to the ground because they had a heat lamp that fell, landed in the hay, lit the whole thing on fire. And I know you hear stories and you're like, yeah, well, but I'm like, I've known people personally. This is like an issue. Do not use a heat lamp. They're cheaper and they're easy to use, but just buy a little bit nicer of a thing and don't worry about things burning down. Just sleep well. It's worth it. Also, another problem with heat lamps is not just that they burn things down, but also that chicks can get what's called pasty butt. I don't have a chick right now to show you. So pasty butt is essentially when they poop, it's called the vent where they poop from, okay? So they poop, and then if it's hot and things, like the poop will actually stick to the butt feathers. And so as they poop, they block the path to drop poop, and it sticks to those butt feathers, and then the next one sticks to it, and the next one sticks to it, and eventually they can't poop anymore. And it's basically glued shut with poop, which is absolutely disgusting. I understand this, but you also don't want to deal with it because that little chick will die because it can't poop anymore, and it is very preventable if you just don't let them get too hot. There's one way to keep it from happening. Some chicks will just get it, and so the best way to do is I always, every single night before I go to bed and I do my nightly rounds of checking on everything, I always pick up each chick, flip them over, check their butt. Just make sure there's no poop on them at all. If there is poop on them, just get a wet paper towel or a wet cloth or whatever that you don't care about getting poop on. Get it wet with some warm water and just rub it off like a baby wipe you would do for a baby's butt. Just rub off the poop and make sure that they can easily poop. That doesn't happen nearly as often when you use the heat source. It's like a tray, the one that I showed you. Use that one. If you use the light, that's a lot harder. Plus, the light can get really hot, and you can actually overheat your chicks and kill them too. So the other one doesn't get as hot in general. It's a lot cooler, and they're gonna have to huddle underneath it, but it's the right temperature for what they need. So even though it's a little bit on the cool side, as long as you don't have them in a cold place, they should be fine. If you've got them outside with a heat plate and they're brand new chicks, they'll probably die. That's not smart. I know that there are some that you could do. I mean, if it's the middle of summer, that's fine. It's winter right now, so my brain's in winter mode. If you put them outside right now in the middle of winter with just a hot plate, they will freeze to death. They'll be so cold. They don't have any adult feathers yet. So when you get chicks from the store and they're super cute little fluffy chicks, that's with their baby feathers. Those do not keep them warm or dry or really anything. I mean, it keeps them a little bit warm, but what really helps them is their big feathers, which they will get actually really quickly. That is a breed specific thing. When they get those feathers, meat chickens take the longest to get real feathers because a lot of them don't even get real adult feathers. They've been kind of like an altered breed for a long time. Not my favorite, not going to touch on that, but certain breeds of chicks will take longer to get feathers, and some of them might not really fully feather out if they're meat birds. If you're getting laying hens, which I'm assuming you are if you're watching this video, you're looking for laying hens, they will tend to feather out all the way. Laying hens don't have that same thing. So once they get feathered up more, like once they have full wing feathers and like their back, top of their back has feathers, that's when I take my chicks outside. Because if they've got a full back of feathers and both full wings of feathers, they kind of tuck themselves in, and they've kind of got like a shell of feathers that they can keep themselves warm, put their little head under their wing, and keep themselves warm. I do not put them outside without a heat source. So just to be clear, at that point, I put them outside with the heat source, the plate. I do not put them out without anything. Once they have full front feathers and tail feathers, and they look kind of like they're coming together, but they're not fully there yet, and they're not really going under the heat lamp anymore at all. Maybe at night they do, but they're not really underneath it much. That's when you take the heat away, and when that will be is breed specific. So I can't be like, oh, in 6 weeks you'll do this, because breed specific. My chickens are Icelandic chickens, and they feather really fast, like really fast. I only have my chicks in the house for like a week or two, tops. They're just like ready to go outside so fast because they feather really quick. But that is just a breed specific quirk that I love. I love that. But you want to watch for those signs when they're feathered enough and they're not really underneath the heat source anymore. And they seem to be doing just fine. They'll go underneath it because it's also kind of like a mother thing. Like if they're nervous, they'll just whoop underneath it. It's really cute because that's what they would do in the wild. If something spooked them, they all swarm underneath their mom, and the mom protects them. So they will do things like that. So if you come out there to check to see if they're going underneath it and they swarm underneath it, you probably spooked them and they're going to run underneath it. My chicks do that all the time. And I'm like, I feed you. You know me. But they still are like, stranger. And they run underneath them, and then you drop food and they're like, oh, food. So just kind of keep an eye for when they're actually, like, they look cold and they're just huddled under there, or if they're just hiding under there. So that's your one thing you need to do is a heat source, okay? Recommend a plate. The next thing you will need when you bring home your chicks, so you've got your tote, you've got your heat source. The next thing you need is feed, and you're going to want to get the crumbles. So the crumbles is the texture size. You have pellets, and then you have crumbles. Crumbles are essentially broken up pellets. Pellets are bigger, and baby chicks have little tiny mouths, and they cannot eat a pellet. It's too big. So, and I'm pretty sure all chick feed is a pellet or is a crumble form, but I'm not positive, so I'm just going to cover my bases there. Make sure it's crumble form and not pellets, okay? Because they can't eat it otherwise. And you're going to want to get chick feed that specifically on the bag says chick starter feed or chick feed. Somewhere it says chick and feed. You know, and there's a lot of different debates on whether you should get medicated feed or not medicated feed. I don't want to jump on that bandwagon. People are really picky. I just tend to get medicated feed anyway because I figure if it's got stuff that's going to help them survive, okay. And I give it to them. I've done both and I've had zero difference. So I don't think it really matters. It's a personal preference. People get really bent out of shape about medicated versus not medicated. And in my experience, it hasn't made very much of a difference at all. And so I tend to get the medicated just because why not give them an extra boost, you know? So that's my mindset on that. It's super not scientific, but that's what I think, you know? So get chick feed, but make sure it's chick feed because you will switch to hen layer feed later, okay? So you're going to keep them on chick feed all the way up. They're going to start to grow in all of those feathers like we talked about. They're going to start to not need the heat lamp anymore. They're going to start to look really dinosaur-like, like they're kind of like lurpy, leggy, and like they dart around a lot. They kind of have like little raptor vibes, you know? So they're going to start looking like that, and you're still going to keep them on chick feed until they seem like they're bigger and they're going to get close to laying. I like to keep them on chick feed up until they're kind of in that in-between zone. I know that this one is a hen and that one is a rooster, but they're super small. That's when I usually switch to layer feed. But I don't want to switch to layer feed until they're getting really close. Because layer feed is something you feed them once they're to the point of laying, and chick feed is what you feed them when they're growing. So I don't think that it's overly, like, don't worry yourself out too much. Like, mistakes will be made. The chickens will be fine if you're feeding them food. If you switch them too soon, they'll be okay. If you switch them too late, you just won't have eggs for a little while. So you don't have to overanalyze, okay? But once they're getting close to laying age, they do need to be on layer feed. If you keep them on chick feed, which I have done before because I didn't realize, I was like, oh, my chickens are the right age, they should be on the other feed, and I forgot to switch them. And I get a bag, I give them layer feed. Immediately I get eggs because they didn't have enough. I think the food doesn't have enough energy for them to really produce the eggs, or enough of whatever it is that they really need to produce the eggs. So you want to make sure that you switch them into layer feed when it's time for them to get ready to start laying eggs, which is pretty obvious. You'll know because the chicks, most chickens lay eggs by 6 months old, pretty standard across the board age, sometimes sooner, sometimes a little later, but 6 months is pretty much the average. Chicks start laying eggs by, or they start becoming hens to lay eggs by 6 months old. So up to that point, you're feeding the starter feed and you're feeding only the layer hen feed. Like I personally, if you don't really want to watch it that closely, I would wait until they're about 5 months old. And then once you're like, oh yeah, they're 5 months old now, I'm going to get the layer feed and just kind of start mixing in with their feed, get them just used to the layer feed. That's totally fine. That's a good, if you want to just calendar it, that's totally fine. I personally also get the layer crumble feed because my Icelandic chicks, for whatever reason, my Icelandic chickens do not like the pellets. They just don't. They won't eat them. They like the crumbles. They will eat their weight in crumbles, but they will not eat the pellets. So, I don't know. You can try that. I've never had, my other breeds of chickens totally don't care. They're like something small and they just eat it. They don't care at all. But the Icelandics, they like the crumble. They also go eat other things first and then they come back to the feeders. So it could just be the fact that they've got other stuff that's more interesting and they don't, I don't know. Other chickens will just eat from the feeders and they're not forage. So it could just be have something to do with that. So if you switch to layer feed and it's the pellets and your chicken is not really eating them, try getting a bag of the crumbles and just see and be like, oh yeah, they're gonna eat the crumbles. Okay, cool. Then we'll just get crumbles from now on. And then just mix it in there. I don't know. You know what I mean? So try one bag at a time, just figure out what they like. Some chickens are not picky, other chickens are picky. I don't know. They're animals. Animals can be picky, just like people. So now you've got a hen who is 6 months old and is going to start laying their first egg. You've got them switched. They are on the adult layer feed. And you have hopefully a chicken coop, or some sort of thing like that. Okay, now what you need is a nest box. You don't necessarily need any nest boxes when they're little. They do need roosts, which are like a branch of some kind up in their coop so they can roost at night up there. But once they get closer to laying, you do need to get them some nest boxes. They do not have to be fancy. I've talked about this before. I use old drawers that were left at my barn when I moved here. And I put them out. And then the hens will sometimes make nests in other spots too. So you can try to be like, oh, lay your eggs here, but they might just not. You never know. If your hens are giving you a lot of problem laying eggs, like they're all over the place, they're never consistently in their boxes. One, look at their box. Is their box a place that can they fit in it? Is it big enough? It should be, in my opinion, at least a square foot, because hens need to lay down in that space and they push themselves all out and make like a circle around their body when they lay an egg. So they need a space big enough that they can really cozy in there, and then it has sides. So if it's too small, they can't fit in there, they're not going to lay in there. If it's too big, it doesn't feel secluded enough and they won't want to lay in it either. Because ultimately, hens will always lay their eggs in the spot that they, well, not always. Sometimes there's weird hens and they'll lay, like I've had a hen lay an egg on the top of the stairs and it fell down the stairs and broke. And I'm like, what were you thinking? But most often, hens will lay eggs where it is the best or like most desirable location for them to actually hatch chicks. So if it's like this hidden little tuck away spot where you can't find it, that's going to be a good spot to raise chicks because it's hidden from predators. So chickens kind of like that tight space that feels not necessarily tight but enclosed. They like to feel like they can nestle into it to lay eggs. So if you're getting chickens to lay eggs in random spots, check your box and just make sure that that's not the problem. And if your box is totally not the problem, you can also just get like a wood egg. They sell them a lot at like stores where you can buy animal feed and stuff. You can buy it's literally a wood egg. It has the same weight and size as like a normal egg, and put that in the box because hens like to lay eggs where there's already an egg. For whatever reason, it just seems like a good idea. Someone else has already laid an egg there. You can have like 15 boxes and have 30 eggs in one box because they just are like, yep, that's the box. So if you're having a hard time with that, put a wood egg in there. Right now, I have a golf ball, which is kind of ridiculous, but they lay eggs next to the golf ball that I have in the nest box. So if that's a problem, you can put an egg in there. You don't have to do that. If there's not a problem, don't worry about it. It's fine. So, and then you should start to be getting eggs. At first, when they first lay eggs, they're not very regular. They're kind of sporadic because it's new. Their body's kind of starting something. Sometimes they start off completely like solid every day for 5 days out of the week. Boom. And then, and then 2 days off or whatever. But over time, they will start to get a lot more consistent, and you'll start to there's a schedule that their body keeps up with. And those first eggs are going to be little, so don't panic if you pick up an egg and you're like, oh my gosh, you were so small, and your normal store eggs are much bigger, or that's the size that they're going to lay. If they're going to lay a store-sized egg and it's like a way smaller than that egg, don't worry. Their first eggs are always little. Give them a couple months and those eggs will start to get bigger, and give them a year and they're going to be enormous. Sometimes hens their eggs just keep getting bigger, I swear, until you've just got these huge eggs. So don't be so concerned. Egg size has nothing to do with you doing anything wrong. It has everything to do with that the chicken is starting eggs. She's little still, her eggs are going to start out little. As she gets older, those eggs are going to get big. Don't worry. That just comes with the territory of being a chicken. So yeah, and that is pretty much all you need to know. You need to have a coop for them in a run. So put together something that fits with the predator load of wherever you live, and a run because they need outside sunlight. If they don't have sunlight, and lots of times people put artificial lights, but if they don't have any sunlight, then do put artificial lights. But be really careful. I don't trust lighting of any kind anywhere near hay, but the best thing is to make sure they have an actual beam of sunlight that shines into wherever they're at, and they will sit in that beam just like a cat does in the house, and they just stretch out in the sunshine, and that gives them what they need to lay eggs. They have to have some sort of light source to lay eggs. You want to make sure they have a light source, and then they will lay eggs. So yeah, recap. Having chicks from beginning to end is really not that hard. Chicks are pretty hardy actually. So, but when they're super little, you have to really be careful, okay? They do also need a water source, and I forgot to talk about a water source. Water sources are important because obviously everything needs water, but chicks will drown if you have too deep of a water source, okay? There's lots of little chick water things you can buy. There's lots of all that kind of stuff, and that's fine. You can do that. It'll be fine. I personally feel like it's a bit gimmicky, and I'm not into that kind of thing. So I use quite often just a Tupperware. Or when they're super tiny, a lid to something that's got that little lip, and I just refill it. If you had a bunch of chickens, I would not use a lid because that would take, that would be ridiculous. But what you need is, you see how big your chicken is, okay? If their head is this part of it, their head is going to come down this far. So make sure that it is not too tall, that they can't get into it, reach it from the ground. And that they're going to run through it, so you don't want it too deep, or they're going to hop up on the side and try to drink from it and fall in. They need to be able to stand up and not drown, because chickens will drown in water sources often because they cannot swim. And our water is really artificial. It's got a side and then it's deep. Nature doesn't do that. You can walk into a pond, go in a little bit, and then take a drink and not drown. So you kind of have to think the chickens, they don't understand. It's got sides on it, so it needs to not be so tall that if they hop in and they fall in, they drown, because you don't want them to drown. That would be horrible. It's really disturbing if you have a chicken drown. You don't want to deal with that. So make sure your water source is short enough that they can, and when you see how big they are, I always put them in their little box. I line it with paper towels or with wood shavings or something like that, something like that, and then I put the heat source in there and plug that in, and I get my bowl for food and whatever bowl I want for water, and I can be oh, this Tupperware fits their height, or you can take sometimes I get a bigger container of yogurt, one of those bigger ones, and I just cut it so there's the right height, or you can do that with a milk carton, but you want to cut it low enough that they can reach it from the ground, which is pretty easy. If you put them in there, you just hold them up to it, you measure, and you cut the tote, or cut the container to reach, but make sure that it's not too deep so they do not drown in the water, because they will definitely get into the water. And it will definitely be a problem if it is too deep. They just, anything that can go wrong that way will, because they don't have space with water. They'll just climb in it, they'll poop in it. So you don't want also a huge container, because you need to wash that out. And if it's huge, if it's big or it's complicated, or you have to break apart moving parts, those adult chicken waters are really great, because you can put the lid on top of it, you twist it, and you can just dump out the water, wash the tray, put it back together, put it in the coop. But if you have to do a whole bunch of fiddling with stuff, they're going to be pooping on that. So unless you're okay with touching poop, I would suggest using something like the bottom of a milk jug, or the small thing of a yogurt, a big yogurt container cut small, because it's something you can just kind of dump out and then just hose it out and then fill it back up and put it back in there. is good. But you also want to make sure it's not too small because they will tip it over. If it's a tiny little thing and they stand on the side and just boop, then they're constantly out of water. Their bedding is always wet, and that's a problem. So they need to have free access to food and free access to water that they cannot spill or drown in. I forgot to talk about water, but there you go. You don't want them to be able to drown in it. So it's actually not very hard. And the upfront, if you really do it like smart, in my opinion, or financially cheap, you know, you can do it for pretty cheap. You can get a tote for what, $10? You get the heat tray, which I don't remember how much that was, but it might have been $20. And then you just use food containers, and then you buy what, a $15 to $20 bag of feed that's like 50 pounds. So, I mean, it's not necessarily an expensive startup. You just have to, your most expensive thing is maybe your heat source, and do not skimp on your heat source because, you know, what sucks more is having everything burned down. So yeah, keeping chickens is pretty easy. You want to have an outside space ready for when they are ready to go out there. And then once they're outside, they're pretty easy. Chickens actually will put themselves to bed at night. They like to sleep in certain spots, and they go to bed before the sun does. Not like significantly before the sun's down, but quite a bit, you know, like I would say at least maybe an hour before the sunset, they are already have put themselves to bed. Chickens are really easy that way. If they don't like what you have made, they don't feel safe in it, then they will go find someplace else that's safe. So bear in mind that you should always count your chickens, because sometimes the chicken gets left outside the coop, or you know, got lost or something, or got taken by a predator. You always want to count your chickens to make sure you're not losing anybody. And if you are missing chickens, I always look for them. And then if I can't find them, I look for what possibly could have happened. If there's a hole in the fence, is there, you know, that kind of stuff, which you should just kind of keep in like maintenance on your chicken coop and run and stuff, just to make sure there's nothing really going on. But keeping chickens is actually pretty inexpensive. It's not really complicated. You just kind of have to keep an eye on them. You just can't be like, oh, they'll be fine, I'll check them next week. They'll all be dead. You need to kind of keep an eye on them. But ultimately, if you have the heat plate, you don't have to worry about them getting too hot or too cold or dying from that. You can pretty much check on them in the morning when you get up before you go to work, and then check on them when you get home from work. And they should be fine. They should be fine if they've got food and water in the morning, and they've got their heat sources plugged in. They should be fine all day. I mean, obviously, if like your power goes out or whatever, like, you know, obviously there's things that can happen, but for the most part, as long as you just check on them morning and night, and then kind of keep close watch over them, you'll be okay. You can do this. It's really not that complicated. It just takes doing it and getting your feet wet and learning and being like, oh yeah, I got this. This isn't that bad, you know, but actually paying attention to real issues, like watching for poop on the butt, you know, things like that can actually be a real problem. Raising chickens is not that hard. You can do this. And if you're like, I never want to do baby chicks again, you can buy adult hens. I sell adult hens to people. You can buy adult hens. They're going to cost you a lot more because someone else has done all of the work. But you could do that. You could. Or you could just raise up your chicks like this and have your adult hens. And then when somebody goes broody, find someone who has fertilized eggs and just pop good eggs underneath her. Let her hatch out her own babies. You know, and so, or you don't have to do that. You could just be like, I just want these chickens for a few years, see how they do. And, you know, the commercial breeds of chickens that you're buying from the store are going to lay eggs. They're from 6 months old to about 3. That's probably about the common egg laying age. And so I would say if you're getting commercial chickens like that, like when I say commercial, I'm not meaning like big businesses eggs. I mean just anything you can buy in the store, you know, any egg layer chicken breed that you can buy in the store. If you're getting those breeds, you would tend to raise chicks, and then the year or the next year you get more chicks, so you kind of have eggs, and then you have adult birds that are kind of fizzling out on eggs. So you want to raise chicks maybe every other year or every second year if you're trying to keep eggs and rotating out hens and stuff like that. But it's not something you have to do very often. It's not that big of a deal. I don't think it's a big deal. I think it's okay to do, and it just takes trying. No one can teach you how to raise chicks. You kind of just got to do it, and then get your feet wet, figure it out. Have someone you can talk to if you need some help, or send me messages. If you need help with something, message me. Put it in the comments down there. I will help you. You know, I don't want anyone to fail. I want you guys to succeed. So if you need some help, or you're curious about something, or you've got additional questions for me, drop them below, and we will answer those questions and help you, because I want you guys to succeed. And when things are scary and like the food source is inconsistent, or we have issues or anything like that at all, it can cause some panics, and I don't want anyone to panic. I want people to feel like they have some control in their life. So if you're in that state and you're scared and you're worried about it, just take a step back. It'll be okay. You can get some chickens. If that will make you feel better, like you have a handle on your life, go ahead, get a few chickens. Don't buy like 50. You know, if you've never done chickens before, get maybe a dozen tops. Like, start with like a reasonable amount of chickens. Don't panic buy, don't break the budget. Just start with a few, at least 6, you know, and just take it easy. It'll be okay. You'll get there. I don't want anyone to be in a state of fear. I think that that's the worst way to live your life. So hopefully this helps you. Hopefully if you are worried about it, you can get some chicks. I think there's going to be some shortages in chicks because everyone's kind of in that like, oh my gosh, eggs are expensive, which I agree, they are expensive. And so people's next response is, I'm going to get some chicks and raise my own chickens, but then a supplier that's used to a certain amount of people who do that, and then all of a sudden it gets swamped with a ton of other people, they're going to have shortages. And it's going to be because supply and demand does not match. So don't panic, you've got this, you can raise chickens, it's okay, you can do this. So good luck, friends. I hope that your chickens are adorable and that you get some cool eggs and that you feel like you've got a good handle on your own food source. So good luck.